Welcome to another episode of the Life Creative Podcast. This is a show dedicated to helping you get the most from your creativity, offering you inspiration, suggestions, and discussion. So let's get on with the show. So the topic of conversation in this episode is the very reason that there's been a gap between this episode and the previous ones. And that reason is priorities. And so what I want to talk about here is how priorities come into play, right? You have things that you like to do and things that you need to do. And a couple of examples. So I have projects and deadlines for the jobby job and personal projects. And those have had to come into play to take priority over the things that I do for fun, right? This podcast is something that I do for fun. I'll be honest, the listenership is very small, and I appreciate every single one of you. And I do this podcast because I enjoy doing it, and I like to put it out there, and I like to believe and hope that it's helped or influenced someone in some way. But it is a lower priority than, say, the jobby job, which pays the bills, keeps the roof over my head, and has requirements and timelines that they're non-negotiable. I have to do them. Whereas the fun things, they have the timelines and requirements that I put in place. And sometimes those have to fall by the wayside just a little bit to get the other ones taken care of and guarantee that those other projects are successful. So priorities are a key aspect of daily life for every single one of us, and we all have to make these choices. And sometimes you're going to really hate the fact that it's going to take too long to get the next podcast episode out, the next picture, the next piece of writing, blog post, book, whatever it may be, song. It's just going to take longer than you want it to be. And after a while, it'll start to bug you. But you have to remember that we all have to deal with priorities. And sometimes that means making the difficult decision of saying, okay, I just can't get to that today. I can't get to that this week because there's this other thing or these other things that I need to take care of instead. And you might not like it, but you have to live with it and accept it. So we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk about this a little further. Have you ever thought about creating your own podcast? Certainly you must like podcasts because you're listening to this one, and I'm sure many others. Well, if you've ever thought to yourself, I bet I could do that better, or I have a subject that I'd like to make a podcast for, then you can go ahead and do that very easily using Anchor.fm. In fact, Anchor.fm is the site that I use to host this very podcast. And what I like about it is they provide me all the tools and walk me through all the steps to not only creating my podcast, but very easily taking care of all the necessary details for distributing it as well. So if you want to go ahead and easily create your own podcast, start today on Anchor.fm. That's Anchor.fm. So how do you deal with making those decisions? Well, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on which way you look at it, it is not as simple as these ones make me money, so that's important. Because the truth of it is that once you've paid the bills, you've done what you need to do to pay the bills, and expenses, whatever it may be. After that, it really comes down to, hopefully, the things that you enjoy doing. And that's how I look at it, right? I have the things I need to do to pay the bills and the expenses and take care of all of that stuff. And then everything else I do it for the fun and enjoyment of doing it and hoping that it benefits somebody else in some way. And this podcast is a prime example of that. So for me, it's difficult to prioritize my personal projects sometimes because I do have so many, and there's so many things I want to do and so many things that I do. And there's also the list of things that I know I probably can never get to, but I don't let that stop me. But what I do is I prioritize them all and say, okay, I haven't done this thing in a while and I should do that now, or I should do that next. And hopefully you can do the same, right? I'm hoping that not everything you do is because you need to pay the bills. Now, I know that's probably the case for some people, And I wish that you had more time on your hands. I truly do. It's not, it's never simple black and white of, okay, well, I've paid the bills. What can I do now? What do I want to do? Unfortunately, there are sometimes those choices are made for us. But for those of us that have the opportunity to pick and choose, you will at some point have to make that difficult decision of, okay, what's the thing I'm not going to get done today? What's the thing that has to sit and wait last because I need to do this? Prime example would be a bad metaphor, but I've got a flat tire on my car and I need to change the oil. Well, clearly, hopefully changing the tire is the first priority because the oil is secondary. You don't need that till the car's moving, and you can't move the car to change the oil until, the tire's done. So the tire is the clear priority there, right? So it's a bad metaphor, but you get the idea. So as you go forward, be thinking about this and just be consciously aware and accept that sometimes priorities mean there'll be a delay in some of the things that you want to get done. And that's just the way it is. Do not beat yourself up about it, right? Hopefully you'll always get to return and go back to those things that you wanted to get to. So in my case, like this podcast episode, I got back to it and finally got to record it. So, take that forward with you. That's it for this episode. Please be sure to share this with anyone along with all the back catalog. I hope that they're all beneficial to somebody. And if it's not you, maybe it's somebody you know, and share it with them and tell them about it. Please rate this podcast if you have time. I do appreciate it. Other than that, I will speak to you next time.